Fourth stop of the Bassmaster Opens season heads to Logan Martin Lake in Alabama. And boy, this is going to be a fun one. That and more on episode 175 of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Ronnie Moore. My co-hosts, like always, Kyle, Jessie, and Kyle. We're heading to Alabama. Last year, we had a few opens in the state of Alabama, just one this year, but it should be a good one. Plenty of fish catches, and the month of May, the first few days of May, means it should bode well for catching as well.
Absolutely. When you think of May fishing, really anywhere in the Southeast, it's one of those times of the year where you can do a little bit of anything. There's still fish lingering around, potentially spawning like we saw last year on Lay Lake during the Elite Series. There's shad spawn going on. There's fish moved offshore. There's a little bit of everything. And Logan Martin's one of those lakes that, provides a lot of different kinds of cover, docks, grass once the water gets raised, which we will talk about here in just a little bit. But, brush piles offshore, obviously current. There's big spotted bass, big largemouth. It's a really unique fishery, and it's a fishery that has a ton of fish. Just in my experience living here in Alabama, it was always my favorite lake to fun fish and still is. Just based on the fact that it has a big population of fish. It's not hard to go catch, some fish. Not always the big ones. That's where it gets challenging. I think we will see a lot of guys catch limits. A lot of guys catch a lot of fish. I mean, big numbers, but catching those above average size bass will be a bit of a challenge for guys this week at Logan Martin.
Yeah, but this is the time of the year where you can do so many things like you talked about, spawning fish. The shad spawn should be a deal as well. You could maybe catch some early offshore fish or late pre-spawn fish. And with it being the Coosa River, it seems like in the state of Alabama, you've got Smith Lake, and then you've got a bunch of lakes that are off of rivers. And you've got the Tennessee River that swoops through the top part of the state. You've got the Coosa River, the Tallapoosa. Those all kind of combine in Wetumpka there and makes the Alabama River. And so all of these lakes that are rivers end up having spotted bass in them. I guess every single lake in the state of Alabama has spotted bass in it. The Tennessee River does. You've got the Coosa, Tallapoosa, Alabama River,
Bear
Smith
River,
Lake does. Yeah, like so
yeah.
every single lake has spotted bass. And with that, you're always going to catch a lot of fish. And the last time I was at Logan Martin was 2018 for an open that Justin Atkins won. He didn't fish any of the other opens that year, just that one. And so he didn't go to the Bassmaster Classic. But I do remember sitting out in the middle of the river. It was early fall. It was September, so it was grimy. It was hot as can be, but not nearly the dead of summer. But these fish were, they had moments in time to feed, and they were really current dependent. And when that current would be flowing, they'd set up in the right spot. And I just remember watching Justin Atkins catch like 94 fish on a shaky head in front of me. It just was every cast. It was a shaky head fish every cast, and he ended up catching enough fish to win. I do believe there were some locals that did well in that event and were able to use their knowledge. And so we'll see how that factors in this week. But this is a great fish catching time of year in this fall when it's grimy. Local advantage may play. Local advantage could play now. We saw how it was with Lay Lake with Will Davis taking the title there at the Elites last year. But a lot of those locals, in your opinion, Kyle, and in my opinion, they know how to run and dictate their tournament day based on current flow. They know when they need to run to the dam or if they need to go to the bottom dam or however it is. And so, depending on the current flow this week, that'll really adjust most of their decisions. Whereas other anglers who maybe aren't in tune with the Coosa River are picking their spots based on where they got bites, not time of day, not current flow. Just I'm going to get in this area, and so we'll see how each game plan probably works out for itself.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. Obviously, the current is something we're going to talk about a lot today, I'm sure. Obviously, during Bassmaster Live on Saturday, it'll be a big topic of conversation. We'll get to see how that plays out the first 2 days. But you're exactly right. I mean, when you look back a couple of years ago, even at Lay Lake during the Open in 2020, that was in December, completely different time of the year. But we did see locals play. I mean, locals played a big factor in that tournament. Obviously, Keith Carson ended up winning the event. But you looked
ignoring everything that everyone else was doing, cranking grass like
it's the most
crazy.
Random thing ever. Yeah, basically. I can remember being on the lake with Wes Logan, and we were doing some Skype hits for Bassmaster Live, and that was one of the things he and I were talking about. We were like, we were just driving up the river, and then we found him. Where we found him was just like a place. And again, that was the first time I'd ever been on the body of water for the most part. So I looked at him, I said, dude, call me crazy, but like if I was here fishing, I would just think this is a bunch of dead water. And he looked at me and he goes, that's what I thought it was too.
Keith,
And
did you break down? Are you all good? Did you choose to fish
yeah,
right here, or
right.
is this just where your boat sat? Yeah.
Right. So to see him catch him the way they did, or that he did, was really interesting, and it was really eye opening, in a lot of ways. But back to the local advantage, there will certainly be guys. Naturally, when you look at the EQ field as it is, there are so many Alabama anglers and guys that have had success early on this season. You can list them off. I mean, Matt Adams obviously having a great year. Tucker Smith's had some success, of course. Scott Canterbury not being an EQ angler, but fishing this event in hopes to win, I imagine. Um, and many
Will
more.
Davis Jr.'s in
Nania.
there.
How do
Yeah.
you not
There's
throw Joey Nania in the list? I mean,
100%.
guides on the lake. There are a lot of guys, from the state of Alabama that are fishing this event that I think without a question will have a major advantage from the exact same thing you just talked about with the current flow, understanding what the fish will do in certain currents. Over the course of practice, you're only going to be faced with so many variables and so many different conditions. Well, if things change during the week, obviously those guys, on paper will have a massive advantage over, the guys that are fishing there for the first time.
Yeah, there's 25 anglers on the pro side from the state of Alabama, and that's take that with a grain of salt. Andrew Loberg from California, he lives in Alabama, so he's listed there. So not all are locals to that. You could be a Guntersville guy, but you've probably fished at Logan Martin in these tournaments, and so like you said, a couple elite guys are jumped in there that aren't normally in all of them. I think Canterbury's fishing this division of the
Correct.
opens because he was at Washita. He'll be at Logan Martin and he'll be at Eufaula, Oklahoma, and most likely. And so those guys, but then you have the Will Davises who jump in just for that event or things like that. So we'll keep an eye on that. Luke Palmer, I know he'll be there. And breaking news to the podcast. Kyle mentioned Bassmaster Live on Saturday, and it's because he's going to be a part of the Bassmaster Live crew. So, for those who don't know, uh, the Bassmaster production team here in Little Rock, we do a lot of other things other than just B.A.S.S. So, we do steel timber sports. We've done that for 30, 40 years, it seems. And so, when they called up and said, hey, we want Tommy Sanders to come to our Virginia Beach event, that's where Tommy will be this weekend with the rest of the crew. And half of our crew will be here doing Bass Live. And so, it'll be myself, Such, Kyle coming in and filling out our analysis team is an Elite Series pro, and that is Buddy Gross, who actually fished Logan Martin in February earlier this year, a part of the NPFL event. So Buddy's been on that lake, had a top 5 finish, so he'll be able to bring some refreshing insight there. He was eager when I gave him a call, and he said, "Yeah, I'd love to come do it. Just help me get there and back because it's a quick turnaround before Murray practice on Monday." And so we're going to ship him in and out real quick, and he's going to come and be a part of Bass Live. So Kyle, I'm excited. You made your debut. Did you think when 2024 started you'd make your debut under the circumstances of a postponed event at a Harris Chain and then turn around and make another debut, this time in studio? When you spent your whole beginning of your career here at JM behind the scenes in studio?
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. To answer your question, no, I did not see that happening. The circumstances that it's happened both times have been just kind of a dire need situation. But like every time it's been asked, I love doing it. I love being in the studio for live. It's one of the things I miss a lot now being in Birmingham. It'll certainly be an adjustment period, but I'm looking forward to it a ton. And, the best analogy I can give is, obviously I'm a big baseball guy. So I'm basically like the long relief pitcher. Like when things really go bad, like call this guy from the bullpen. Like he's not our best option, but he'll get the job done and he'll eat up some innings for us. But that's pretty much what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna step in and eat up some hours. So obviously some of the other members of the crew, obviously Tommy Sanders, being gone, that's a bummer for the audience. Great for me to be able to join the show. When Ronnie asked originally, he posed it as if I needed to step in for Tommy Sanders. Like, buddy, I'm not stepping in for Tommy Sanders. I'll join the show, but I can't step in for Tommy Sanders. That is at least over the course of basically all of my life been the voice of Bassmaster, and I have no business being in the same conversation. But anyways, I am thrilled to get to join the show, and I've been looking forward to it ever since you asked, Ronnie.
Well, I'll say this. I've got a couple thousand hours of Bassmaster Live under my belt, and I am nowhere near equipped to step in and fill up for Tommy Sanders. So no one's filling in for Tommy. We're just doing the show without him, and we're doing our best. So it'll be fun being at the big desk here and knocking out the opens like we have the last few years. It's been, like you said, 2020, we were live for the opens, and it was boat to boat then because we had co-anglers still fishing on the final day. And so now how far we've come introducing the EQ points race, or introducing the overall qualification format where you can qualify from a division or from overall, and then it morphing into the EQ exclusively for the Elite Series bids. So it's cool to see how far it's come. And I know Hank Weldon's got some more changes up his sleeve, hopefully for the better. And those maybe, coming in the next little bit, or next year or two. But that's what's always nice. As soon as changes are made, we plan to stick to them for a few years. But as soon as they're set in stone, we start thinking about if there was a change, what would be that change? And then you get feedback from the tournaments and you now know. So it's been fun to cover. Tommy said it before, but this is what I would call my favorite drama, is, other than the final day of the classic weigh-in, is the Bassmaster Opens, because there's so many fresh faces, so many stories worth being told, so many eager people trying to make that next step. And so it's very cool. I like to think of it like March Madness for college basketball. You have people not a pro actively trying to showcase that they can be a pro at the same time as competing. These aren't just open workouts and they're proven they have the skills. They're doing their open workout in the middle of competing to do this. And so we get to see that through the Bassmaster Opens. Tell me about the Alabama weather. It looks like it's been in the 70s. It's 80 today. There was some fog, over the last day or so, it seemed, or there's fog coming maybe tomorrow. But we had thunderstorms here in Little Rock that have now hit Alabama as well, and they had some big lightning and things this morning, and which this morning is Tuesday, April 30th, when we're shooting this. Whether you're listening to it in the evening or the next morning, that's our perspective. They still have one more day of practice before day one, and that would be Wednesday, May 1st. So what's the weather been like, and is it overall in Alabama been trending towards consistent weather? You go from pre-spawn into the spawn, and we're still in the spawn, but it's been consistent enough that these fish are just coming into spawn or going out for shad spawn just infrequently.
Yeah, so it's funny you asked that because I was just talking to Hank Weldon yesterday, and he made the comment that the weather here in Alabama has been very consistent, which is not normal. I mean, that's not really the norm. Obviously, you get giant gaps in air temperatures, a cold front moving in, things of that nature, but it's been consistently warm. Obviously, warm nights, warm days, up into the high 70s, the 80s, of course. And then you mentioned it. Obviously, we got some rain this morning, heavy rain, but it was, not sustained. I wouldn't say it's enough to make a significant change, maybe for a day of practice for the sake of the current running, but it's been consistent. I think that's the one thing you can look at is like I said, the warm nights is something that Hank and I talked about, is a good thing for the sake of, warm nights are really good pre-spawn moving into spawn. Obviously, that's going to push a lot of fish to begin spawning, but you know, consistency is good regardless because it's going to get more fish doing, whatever the predominant pattern may be. Like you said, it might be a shad spawn. Obviously, still going to be some fish spawning to some degree, whether we see that on the final day or not on live, to be determined. But I can't wait because, again, I love this lake so much. It is a really, really fun lake. I've always compared it to a lake that you're very familiar with there in Arkansas, and Lake Hamilton. It fishes very similar in a lot of ways because it has a lot of the same features, just no current, much less, much different in that regard. But should be a really fun time of the year to fish the event. Like we mentioned, there should be a ton of different patterns. The warm, consistent weather leading into it should give the anglers a good idea of, what's going on and what to expect during the tournament days as well.
Yeah, the only current you get at Lake Hamilton is from how many pontoons going up and around the lake. That's what pushes the water to and fro. When you're looking at the weather, like you said, pretty consistent overall. It's highs in the 80s for tournament days, lows in the 60s. So 60 to 80 every single day. I think the highest it'll get is Thursday, where it's mostly sunny, but we'll have isolated thunderstorms come in on Friday, and then more of a threat of rain on Saturday, about 50% chance. So rain is actually, you think about current flow and you want it to be maybe 100 degrees for the power company. Like people running their AC units and wanting to generate power, they need to do that. But also the thing is the threat of rain often gets them letting water out so that the lakes don't get too high or too low, and they have to manage water flow that way. So we'll keep an eye on that. Man, Logan Martin, the fourth stop of the season. The past three events we had two before the elites even started, and then we had one before the Bassmaster Classic. We had Scott Martin win the Division One event at Okeechobee, setting records there. We go to Division Two, Lake Ouachita, their first stop, and Jeremiah Kendi, a local, wins there. So that's 2 for 2 on home lake wins by Opens anglers. Jeremiah actually signed up. I gotta see. I gotta make sure. Did he sign up? We gotta click. I gotta click it and see. The rosters real quick, because that's a big.
I'm seeing it right here. He is officially on the roster for this event.
That's good. So Jeremiah Kendi did sign up, because I asked him, I said, hey, Jeremiah, if you were going to win tomorrow, because I was going to Ouachita every day to see y'all. I said, hey, Jeremiah, if you were to win, you signing up for the other ones? He's like, you dang right, because I'm going to turn that into a classic bid, another 10K paycheck. So he'll be one of the 10 anglers from the state of Arkansas in the Open this week. And then we went to, we had two elites down in Louisiana and Texas. Then we had the Open at Santee Cooper, where Kyle Austin, a guy who has been knocking at the door, gets to break through on his home lake and use the special spot and great timing as well to win the Santee Cooper event. So we had our third local that we could call it. These guys are traveling pros for the most part, but they are local to that lake that they won on. So three locals in a row winning the Open. So that tells me right now, Kyle, that when I look at the roster, Matt Adams, Wade Beatty, Josh Butler, Scott Canterbury, Will Davis Jr., Cody Detweiler, Steve Drennan. I can't list them all. There's 25 of them. You've got so many other Laker Howe, Zeke Gossett, Sam George. You got Joey Nania, obviously, Tucker Smith, Trey Swindle, Brady Vernon, Garrett Warren, Andrew Loberg. There's Russ Lane, quite a few people. Logan Johnson's been close. A bunch of Alabama anglers that'll all be trying to fight for that. Probably more locals in this event than any other event we've seen so far this year. So it'll be local cooking. But you've been at all of these opens. What's the vibe been amongst the competition? Because last year, and we'll get into this in the points race in just a minute, but last year there was a small group that dominated and made top tens early, and they kind of had a big lead. Basically, everyone other than three people have had the opportunity to slip this year. They've had a 70th, 80th, 90th place finish. So it's still kind of wide open between a lot of people.
Yeah, it's definitely setting up differently. The one thing I wanted to add is you said that, locals had won every single event to this point. That means without a doubt, somebody from Pennsylvania is going to win this one, and it's not going to be a local at all. Law of average says we got to break the trend at
Hey, he's
some
got
point.
a pink floating worm. That's what he's going to catch him on. Yeah, let's go at the bottom of the
But
lake.
But you're exactly right. I mean, when you look at last year's EQ field, I mean, it's basically an extension of what they're doing on the Elite Series for the most part, all the guys that qualified. But this year, it's certainly been a lot different. Obviously, relatively small sample size that we're looking at, but after the first two events, it looked like a handful of those guys were going to be in the same exact ballpark as our EQ field from last year that just dominated every event. And obviously Santee Cooper certainly threw some guys for a curveball, and they jumped pretty far down the standings. But the reality of it is, we know how easily you can turn it around, especially this early in the season with another good finish and jump right back in there. Just to give some context with all the guys, that kind of had lesser events at Santee Cooper. Easton Fothergill, for instance, obviously I've been paying super close attention to Easton and Bo. but I'm looking at it here. Didn't even have a great event at
84th.
Santee Cooper. Yeah, 84th and or 83rd. Yeah, I'm looking at 83rd. Either way,
Oh,
and
sorry. That's actually, so we have to update that because somebody did get DQ'd from that. So that's why my number's off. My bad.
and and even despite a bad finish, is still sitting, in fifth in EQ points, and that just shows really the fact that some of the guys that were even above him or below him, fell way down. So really the thing I would keep an eye on is the fact that there is still obviously so much to be determined, and one good event or one bad event can send you in either direction, up or down the leaderboard. But the vibe has certainly been that I can tell is that it's certainly going to be a grind. You're going to have to be consistent. And, from here on out, if you've had a bomb, you don't want another one. And if you haven't had one, you want to obviously keep that off your resume.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I kept track of. Is that three anglers have had top 50s in all three events. I kind of think of top 50 as being a number of you're either just barely outside the cut for a check, or or you've gotten a top 10. So you're in that your first to 50th solid event. Even if it's bad, you got a low check or you barely missed the check, but that's where you want to be is top 50. And everyone, there was about obviously 50 anglers who had a top 50 in the first event. And then about 20 anglers had top 50s after the first two events. And there's only three that have had a top 50 in all three opens this year: Evan Kung, Dakota Eber, and Cody Meyer. Um, but it just shows you the positivity of a good finish. Easton's got a seventh and an 11th, so his 83rd hurts, but he's still fifth in the points because of that positive, almost two top tens. Then you think about a Paul Marks, fourth and an eighth. Then he gets 118th, and he's down. I mean, if that's ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th. So 14th in points. Very crazy there. You think about a Bo Browning, like you said, he's outside the cut right now, 11th place in points. And it would be he's got a ninth and then two finishes in the 50s. So nothing, his two finishes aren't inside the top 50, but they're 53rd and 56th. So you got to stack consistency no matter how you can get it. And you got to have, if you're at a Christian Ostrander, you're the last man in the points race. Your 67th that you got at Santee better be your probably lowest of the year. You don't want to stack multiple 70s or 80s. Well, Kyle, that brings us to the B&W Trailer Hitches question of the day. All right. So I've got the question of the day for you would be, who do you think, it's a two-pronged question. Who do you think is going to be our EQ points leader after the Logan Martin event? So 4 events in the books. Who will be the points leader? Or of the top 9, how many will we see fall out and how many will we see stay in? We had quite a few fall out at Santee Cooper. And so while you think on that, I will remind the folks today that today's episode is proudly sponsored by B&W Trailer Hitchers, our go-to for all of our towing needs. Made in America with a top-notch quality backed by a lifetime warranty. B&W has you covered whether you're towing your boat to the lake or hitting the road in your RV. The tow and stow adjustable ball mount in particular is a great hitch for anglers. Adjustable drop, multiple ball options, and it even stows away neatly right behind your truck when you're not using it, so you never have to crack your shins again with the B&W Trailer Hitch. Head over to their website today and check out the B&W Trailer Hitch. And so that brings us to the B&W Trailer Hitch question of the day. Kyle, I'm putting you on the spot. Read me off the top 9 and give me a stab in the dark on who's going to be our points leader, or if you've got a ratio, 6 stay, 3 leave, whatever it is.
Yeah, so we'll start out from the top. Obviously, Evan Kung, as Ronnie mentioned earlier, is leading the EQ points, followed by Dakota Eber, Matt Adams, Mike Sermon, Easton Fothergill, Andy Newcomb, Bobby Bakewell, Cody Meyer, and Christian Ostrander. To answer your question, I've had plenty of time to think about it, and I'm still pondering. But what I will say is Dakota Eber sitting in second place, I think has nobody surprised. I don't think that surprises anybody that knows
Dangerous.
anything about Dakota Eber. And I feel like the easy answer is Dakota Eber will take over the points. And that has nothing to do with Evan Kung. It's not a negative whatsoever, but it just seems like the track that Dakota has been on, not just this year, but for the last several years, has basically just been a model of consistency. And we know that, when it comes to the Tackle Warehouse, Opens EQ points, that's what it's all about. So if I had to take a stab in the dark, I would say Dakota Eber will be our points leader after Logan Martin. With that said, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if Evan Kung was still leading it,
Whoa,
because
whoa, 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 whoa. You cannot backtrack and you can't hedge your bets. You made your pick.
I'm still
People just
making my
stick
pick.
just stay
I'm
with
just
that. Stay with
I'm
that.
just I'm just telling you that I wouldn't be surprised either way, because I think that based on the style of fishing that I've seen from Evan this year, I think that a lot of the things I've seen with my own eyes him succeed with, could certainly be a factor at Logan Martin. As for shifts in the top nine, what a shot in the dark here. I mean, I'm talking we're just gonna throw out a number. I'm
And I'll
gonna
say
say
this, I'll say the fans at home, they need to know this perspective. From first in points to ninth is 80 points. From Evan Kung to Christian Ostrander, it's 80 points from the first man in the points winner right now and the last man in the Elite Series. It's 80 points. Below Christian Ostrander, 10th, 11th, 12th, things like that. If you went down, let's just say you go down to 20, 451. That's 35 points or 37 points from ninth to 20th. So you've got 80 points from first to ninth, and you've got 37 points from ninth to 20th. So plenty in a 225 boat field, plenty of positions to jockey there. Now go ahead. I set the stage. What's the magic number?
I'm gonna say six will stay the same and three will be different.
Okay.
As to
Okay.
predict who's going to be the three that are out, who knows? Literally, who knows? But I feel like six is a safe number. Whether that be, somebody in the top nine jumping up and some of the guys ahead of them moving down, whatever the formula might be, I'm going to take a shot in the dark, and I mean the dark, that six guys will stay and three guys will change.
So I'll throw a three-prong deal at you because I'm going to answer all these questions in a minute too.
Who are the
Uh,
three guys that are going to
no,
jump into
no,
the
no, no,
top
no,
nine?
no. You mentioned Dakota Ebert taking the points lead in your opinion, and that's within consideration there. He's 13 points behind right now. But who is someone that's gonna have a fantastic event that won't take the points lead? Maybe they're already in the top nine, but is really gonna maybe we see him in the top 10 on Bassmaster Live the final day. Like that they might not, Dakota gets 40th. He's boxed out a lot of people from passing him in the points race, but some people can do some really good work and improve from 15th to third or, 10th to sixth. Who do you think's going to possibly out of this group show themselves in the top 10? Because we know at least one of them will.
As far as guys that are currently in the top nine ending up in the top 10 on the final day,
That, or if they're like 15th, 16th in the points race, that they'll put themselves in the top nine because they're going to get a top 10 this week.
I'll go even further than top 15. Uh,
Ooh.
and I've got some reasoning behind it, but I think Kyle Austin from 23rd is going to continue the momentum that we saw him have, obviously on his home lake with a huge win. We've already talked about it before on the podcast, just a flawless performance. Again, like you mentioned, Kyle Austin has been so close so many times that I think the start of this season had to have been a little discouraging, because you know that you need to be consistent. You know you can't really afford to have a bomb to your resume, but having a win put him so much in the right direction, even despite a 117th place finish at Washita. Obviously, that's going to be a big hiccup on the resume, but I think Kyle Austin is going to continue the momentum. I got to talk to him at the Bassmaster Classic. He was roaming around media day, and you could just tell like there was a different vibe to him. If you'd have talked to him before his win at Santee Cooper, I think he'd have probably been a little discouraged, knowing that mountain to climb was going to be that much more difficult. But I have got a feeling that we're going to see Kyle Austin make a rally and continue his momentum on to Logan Martin. As for guys in the
No, I
top
like that. That was
15,
good. If you don't want to if you don't have one in mind, don't force it. But if you do have a second one, then we'd love to hear it.
the second one I would say that the one that caught my eye, and you mentioned him earlier, was Paul Marks. Paul, obviously a spotted bass guy, at Lake Lanier. Different spotted bass. They don't act the same. They don't eat the same, but spotted bass are still spotted bass. And, I think that if I had to guess, I'm sure he spent a good time at Logan Martin, just being that it's not super far. I'm sure he's fished tournaments there and fished there, a good bit during pre-practice. Again, I'm assuming that. I actually don't have any inside information on that, but
And his roommate and travel buddy Tucker Smith, has most
100%.
likely spent time on Logan Martin, and that's a good uh, avenue to break down that is bouncing ideas off your roommate.
And going back to what we've talked about, all the different patterns that'll play, it certainly seems like, you know, fishing fish on live scope and using forward facing sonar will certainly be a factor. I'm not saying it's going to be an all day thing. I think we're going to see some really fun catches early in the morning, shad spawn, fishing shallow. I think there's going to be a lot of that, brush piles, whatever it may be. But I think that when you get a spotted bass, their nature a lot of times is just to roam, and that's regardless, of where you're at. Obviously, Coosa River spotted bass have the option to live up the river and be around current and things of that nature. So it is certainly different than a herring, spotted bass. But I think a guy like Paul Marks, like you said, Tucker Smith, guys that are familiar with fishing for these fish, Emil Wagner would be another one. Those two later guys that I mentioned obviously need a really good finish to jump back up into the to the race. But Paul Marks being there in 14th place, I think that could bode well. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see Easton or Bo, in the top 10. Obviously, they're not local to here by any means, but having gone to school at Montevallo, they certainly have
He's on a
spent plenty
freaking
of
roll
time.
as well. Easton is just,
So
I mean,
yeah,
him and Nick
absolutely.
won at Table Rock. I think they almost won at Kentucky Lake just a couple days ago or weeks ago. Yeah, I could see that as well. But for me to answer that question, I tend to agree with you with Dakota, and I say that because we're really only limited. We're limited to just three guys: Evan Kung, Dakota Eber, Matt Adams, because there's a 13-point gap from Kung to Eber. Then there's a 26-point gap to Matt Adams. And then it's 25 points to Mike Sermon. So Mike is 50 points behind Dakota and almost 70 points behind the lead. So you're going to have those guys really fall and have a bad event. I don't think you're going to have a bad event out of those guys. So if you had to pick one out of the top three to lead, most likely I feel like it's Dakota Eber as well. And that might be the last time we see the points lead change the rest of the year. If we're being completely honest, it could be Dakota's for the rest of the year just because of who he is and what he's done and how good he is on a roll right now as well. Um, I really feel that we're going to have five stay in the top nine and four cycle in and out just because there are so many people 10th through 16th, 10th through 20th that aren't far behind in points, and they does lend themselves to being this style of fishing. When it comes to someone who's going to make a big move this week, I feel like Trevor McKinney is going to be that guy. I feel like he could be uh, in contention on that final day, whether it's a shad spawn bite, whether it's up a creek, as far as he can go, whether it is cranking. He's won the bracket on Lay Lake. He's fished the Coosa River multiple times in college. I
Won
feel like,
another, won another. He won a wild card on Lay Lake. So I mean,
yeah, I
great,
feel like
great.
he he's really good at junking around, and whether it's locking a swim jig in his hand, and then I'll just pick up a spinnerbait, and like Trevor, if we think Trey is zoned in and dialed up on his electronics, Trevor is probably good with electronics, but the opposite. Trevor is the most, I don't want to say, Trevor is a great kid, absolutely fantastic. Didn't want to talk on the microphone in high school tournaments, and has progressed to being such a great speaker and has done it in the Bassmaster Classic stage and all those things. I feel like this is Trevor's year, but I also feel like Trevor could totally launch his boat. And I just have this picture for some reason. He could compete in the opens in overalls with no t-shirt underneath his overalls and still catch their butt with boots. He could be tucked in his boots. Like that's just Trevor knows how to read water for a young kid. He knows how to fish all shallow circumstances, and the most mild mannered kid there is. Um, I really expect a big week out of Trevor, who's 10th coming into this event, just 2 points out of the top nine. I expect to see him be one of those guys, one of those four that jump in and replace someone I could see him being in the top 5 at the end of the week in the points race, and bump up, cut his deficit in half this week. When you think of somebody farther down the list, it's crazy to look at some of these guys down the list that we were talking about: Tucker, Smith, Randall Tharp, Andrew Hargrove, Kenta Kamira, guys who have done with Austin Cranford. All those guys I've mentioned have either done really well in the opens in the past or have made top 10s this season. And they're in 25th to 32nd place in points because they had an absolute bomb. So they have one of the right finishes to build off of. Another good finish here would put them in the top 15, and they have to chip away at Eufaula, Oklahoma, and take it there. So it's low hanging fruit, but I really like Joey Nania to get back in the game this week. It's his home lake. He catches more fish out of this lake than anyone in the world. He spends more time on Logan Martin than anybody else. And 28th place in points, 425 points. That puts him about 425. That's 63 points out of the top 9. I think he makes up a huge chunk of that and will maybe get a top 10 on his home lake, but at least going to get a check, maybe a top 20 and contend, which is dangerous because we'll be rolling into the lake that he won on last year, Eufaula, Oklahoma. So he could really put 2 good ones back to back. Put good work in for Joey. So there's how we lay out. We both think Dakota's going to be the points leader. You think 6 will remain. I think 5 will remain in the top 9 after this event. You've got your eye on guys like Paul Marks, Kyle Austin. I've got my eye on Trevor McKinney and Joey Nania. I can't wait to bring up, and we could bring him up now, but I can't wait to bring up a guy like Ty Faber. People will click on his name, not know anything about, you might not even know about Ty Faber, but I remember covering Ty Faber in a team championship event. He's from like Idaho, Montana, Colorado, somewhere over there.
Colorado.
One of those big flat states over there, or big bumpy states. And I covered him at Kentucky Lake in a team championship fish off. I think Scott Clift, is that his name? He's from Table Rock region. He won that and made it to the Bassmaster Classic at, it was either 2016 team championship and they went to Conroe, or it was the 2015 and they went to Grand Lake. But he got to be a part of that team championship and was in the top 5 there. And so I met him and I actually introduced myself. I said, "What's up, Ty? How are you?" And he's like, "How do you remember me?" And I was like, "Homie, if you've caught him in one B.A.S.S tournament ever, like, I'll remember you most likely." And so it was good to see him. He is right there in the top 25 in 22nd in points. And so very excited to see his name as one of the West Coast or far Midwest guys, however you want to classify it, representing. So cool to see those names. And man, Logan Martin should be a good one. We'll have final day coverage, 4 hours on Fox Sports 1, 8 to noon Eastern time. So we'll start live about an hour after takeoff, and we will fire up Bassmaster Live on Fox Sports 1 for 4 hours. We'll take an hour break, and then we'll come back for 2 hours on Bassmaster.com. And I believe we'll be finishing the show as they check in. So we'll miss the first hour of the morning, but that's fine. We're not missing it. We're just banking those catches. We'll be able to show as many shad spawn catches as we want, because we could have a prolonged shad spawn bite. If that's a deal and going on and they're not too affected by thunderstorms, it's going to be rainy and cloudy most of Saturday. So I could see us really having a good shallow bite. That could determine a lot of people's game plan switch ups from day 1, all sunny, day 2, partially sunny, day 3, mostly cloudy type deal.
That just tends to be the trend we're moving on, is Saturday being rainy and ugly weather, because that was obviously the case there at Santee Cooper. So hopefully it's not to
I
that
hope
extent.
it's not,
We're
no.
not talking about massive thunderstorms,
And
dangerous weather, but
shortening the day, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, hopefully it's not like that, but I'm certainly looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great event. Again, I love these style tournaments where you're almost guaranteed. And now that I've said this, I've basically jinxed it, but you're almost guaranteed on the final day to have guys doing a little bit of everything, because there's so many things, on the table, and different techniques and ways that guys can fish, that I think it's going to be super, super entertaining tournament.
Your Bass Live, future depends on you not jinxing the show. Don't start jinxing the show as soon as you show up. Okay, Kyle?
Yeah, I'll do my best. Hopefully, actually, I'm certain that nothing I say has any effect on what's going on. Despite I'm sure some people would probably tell you otherwise, but it's
People
had no effect.
people have said that to me before, and I'm like, if my words carried that much weight, I would have long been a millionaire. And I promise you, like, I would have won most bass tournaments. I'd have been the Tony Christian. I would have launched my boat and known I was going to win the tournament. But that's another story for another day. Kyle, Logan Martin, stop number 4 of the St. Croix Bassmaster Opens. Coming up this week, you're joining us in studio. We're going to have the top 10 all day long on Bassmaster.com and Fox Sports 1. Super excited about that. And we will be almost halfway through the Bassmaster Open season, determining classic berths and who will be on the 2025 Bassmaster Elite Series. So we'll see you there.